There are moments in life that completely upend everything you thought you knew. Moments when you're blindsided by the very people you trust the most. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when it all started, but in retrospect, I should have known. I should have noticed the signs earlier, the small, seemingly insignificant things that didn't add up. But you don't always see the cracks until the whole damn thing is shattered, and by then, it's too late. I've been living with my girlfriend for 3 years now. Everything seemed fine on the surface, even when things felt a little off at times. We were both introverts, perfectly content to stay in, and our relationship was comfortable, nothing too extreme, just a steady connection. We were close with our families, and I thought nothing of it when she wanted to spend time with them. But recently, something had begun to gnaw at me, something that didn't sit right. It started with her brother. I'd known him for years, even before we got together. He was a good guy, at least I thought so. But something changed in the way she acted around him. It was subtle at first, easy to brush off as nothing. But as time went on, it became harder to ignore. Whenever her brother would invite her out, she'd dress up, way more than she ever did for me. It wasn't just casual, it was like she was trying to impress him, to be seen in a different way. I could sense the tension building. She'd always agreed to go out with him so quickly, almost as if she was waiting for the opportunity to get away from me. But she didn't see it that way. "It's just family," she'd say, and I let it slide, until it became a pattern. But the thing that truly unsettled me was the way she started spending more nights at his place. At first, it seemed harmless. Maybe she just wanted some time with her brother, catching up or just getting away. But the more it happened, the more it started to bother me. She came home wearing clothes that weren't hers, borrowed from him, no explanation. And every time I asked her about it, she'd just brush it off. She'd say things like, "He's just my brother, we're close." But something about the way she spoke about him, the way she looked at him when he was around, it felt different. It felt like something more than just sibling affection. One evening, we were all hanging out together, just the three of us, and I couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort. The way they interacted was strange. There was a closeness, an intimacy that didn't belong between a brother and sister. It wasn't sexual, but it wasn't healthy either. The way she touched his arm, the way their eyes met, it sent chills down my spine. The moments felt loaded, filled with something unspoken. It was as if they shared a secret, one that I wasn't a part of. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that I was overthinking things. After all, they were family, right? Siblings. But then I started wondering, was I just being paranoid? Was I sick for even thinking this could be more than what it seemed? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to, that something was being hidden from me. Was this really just an innocent closeness, or was there something more? I wanted to confront her, to ask her what was really going on, but I didn't know how. How do you ask your girlfriend if she's crossing boundaries with her brother without sounding completely insane? How could I even begin to explain the unease I was feeling without sounding like I didn't trust her? After all, this wasn't something I'd ever experienced before. I didn't know what to believe. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't even know what was real anymore. The trust one had built, the foundation of our relationship, was starting to crack under the weight of my suspicions. And then I found myself thinking about the things I had overlooked, the subtle signs I had ignored. The way she was always so eager to dress up for him, to spend time with him, to act in a way that she never did for me. She told me she loved me, that I was the one she wanted, but her actions didn't match her words. I couldn't ignore that anymore. Something was wrong. I needed to know the truth, even if it meant confronting the one person I thought I could trust with everything. It's strange how you can be so close to someone and still feel like a stranger. We've been living together for years, sharing everything from quiet mornings to chaotic evenings. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer seeing her. Not truly. It was like she was slipping through my fingers. A person who, no matter how much I tried to hold on to, kept changing in ways I couldn't follow. And when it hit me, the realization that I didn't even know the woman beside me, it felt like I had been holding my breath for too long, only now realizing I was suffocating. I couldn't tell you exactly when I first started noticing the distance. Maybe it was after she started spending more time with him. The way she dressed for those nights out with her brother, the effort she put into looking her best, made me wonder if there was something I had missed before. The way she would rush out the door whenever he called, her face lighting up in a way it never did for me. Maybe I had convinced myself that it was innocent at first, but over time, it began to eat away at me. I tried ignoring it. I tried convincing myself that it was just, how would you feel if your partner hid their affair for months or even years? Write in the comments. Family. Just an innocent sibling bond. But then, everything about it felt too intimate. The way they interacted, subtle touches, lingering glances, felt different. It wasn't sibling affection. I wasn't stupid. I could feel the undercurrent of something else, something that had been festering under the surface for who knows how long. But I wasn't prepared for the breaking point. I thought I could confront her, talk to her, lay everything out in the open, but I wasn't ready for what I'd find. No, I had to know for sure. I couldn't keep playing the guessing game. There had to be an answer, one way or another, even if it tore everything apart. One evening, I told myself that I wouldn't leave until I had the truth. I wasn't sure if it was the right decision, but I couldn't stand another minute of this uncertainty. I needed closure, and I needed to see it with my own eyes. So, I did what I had to do. I followed her. She wasn't expecting me to trail behind, and part of me regretted it immediately. But the other part, the part that needed answers, pushed me forward. I kept my distance, trying to stay unnoticed, but every step I took felt like it was leading me closer to the end of everything I had known. I followed her to her brother's place, just as I'd seen her do countless times before. This time, I wasn't going to let it slip by. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. When I arrived, I sat in my car for what felt like hours, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. My hands were trembling, but I didn't move. I couldn't move. The lights in the apartment were on. I could hear muffled laughter through the window, the unmistakable sound of a conversation shared between two people who knew each other too well. The air around me felt thick, and the world outside that apartment felt impossibly far away. I was on the edge, staring into the void, unsure if I should keep going or just turn back. But I kept going. I walked to the back of the building, found a window cracked open, and peered inside. What I saw didn't surprise me, it horrified me. She was lying on the couch, her head resting on his chest. He had his arm draped around her, pulling her closer, their bodies fitting together in a way that felt far too intimate. There was no space between them. They weren't just sitting there talking, as she had claimed. They were tangled up, in a way that made every fiber in my body scream in disbelief. I wanted to move, to shout, to break through the door and confront them both, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. The truth was right in front of me, and yet I couldn't accept it. It was as if everything had shifted into slow motion, and I was trapped in a moment I couldn't undo. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching them, unable to look away. She had been lying to me, but what hurt more than the betrayal was the fact that I had let myself be blind to it for so long. How had I not seen this? How had I not known? I had thought about this moment 1,000 times, imagined the worst-case scenario, feared that I was just being paranoid. But this wasn't paranoia. This was reality. The reality of what had been happening behind my back, in the shadows of our relationship, was so much worse than anything I had imagined. She wasn't just spending time with him. They weren't just sharing casual moments of sibling connection. They were crossing boundaries, and I had been too naive to see it. I turned away from the window, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't let myself be a part of this any longer. I felt the cold air against my face as I walked back to my car, every step heavier than the last. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what to say to her. But one thing was clear. I couldn't ignore this. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The love I had for her had been real, but it wasn't enough to erase the truth. And now, the truth was all that mattered.